This video is a replay of a training I did on how to create the best content for your small business website. And hint, it's not blogging right away anyway. In this video, I talk about why small businesses really need to focus on their core fundamental pages before jumping into blogging and anything else. So in this video, I lay out a common sense approach to creating content on your small business website that starts with being the most helpful to your potential customer, which in turn will help you increase in rankings, but more importantly, get your customers to actually respond. I've also developed some free tools that I'd like you to have, including my website content planner, which you can find in my SEO basics kit at mysiteranked.com/basics. Well, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to create the best content for your website. So today we're going to cover three things primarily: mindset when thinking about content, how to create the perfect page, and then making your plan. And really how I am going to approach this is a lot of common sense, but also just coming at this from a practical standpoint. As I was mentioning before I hit record here, SEO can be extremely confusing and complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to, kind of break things down into action items that you can actually accomplish and that actually move the needle. Hey, Jennifer. So I am going to say a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is not going to be geared towards blog posts. That's in my next training. So next week, I'm going to be talking all about creating the perfect blog post. I'm going to touch on blog posts today, but really we're going to be just approaching content from a fundamental basis. So that starts with just getting crystal clear on what Google likes and what Google loves. And so if you, sorry, I'm still having to admit people. So this is why I need an assistant on these things. So the thing to really just start out with is that Google wants to serve up the best possible results to the viewer. So that's really how you should think about your content. And so how does Google determine that? That is essentially by how the viewer interacts with your website. Couple things to note: Google loves more content. Google likes sites with lots of pages. And Google really, more importantly, loves how your content is organized. So if you look at the industry leaders, if you look at your competitors, if you look at who's ranking well in your industry, generally they're going to have a lot of content. They're probably going to have several pages. And more importantly, they've probably got it organized in a nice fashion, which we'll talk about today. So the first thing is to really get your mindset correct when thinking about content. And more than anything, we're gonna actually not get too far into a lot of the technical SEO today. We're really gonna be talking more just high level about putting yourself in the customer's shoes. And that's really how I approach SEO. If you hear me talk, a lot of times I'm not gonna be talking about the real nitty gritty technical stuff, because to be God honest, so many small businesses jump right into that stuff and just kind of overlook the fundamentals, the common sense things like, hey, what should actually be on my website? What does my customer actually need my site to say, do, answer? Those are the things you should really be thinking about. And what I like to say is, a way to think about this is your website the best? And I actually say the most helpful. Is your website the most helpful resource on the internet for your specific product or service? If if the answer is no, then you need to get it there. And you need to look at who is dominating your industry and what are they doing right. But if you can continuously focus on making your website the best and the most helpful in your industry for your product or service, you will win this game. And I want you to think long term. So I always recommend planning in 6 to 12 month increments. Here in my company, we usually do these kind of 6 month sprints, but normally we've planned our content out for about an entire year. And so the thing for you to take away from this is do it in whatever time is reasonable for you. If you can do it in 3 months, great. But if you need to really look at extending this out into more of a 12-month thing, then go for it. Because your website is a living, breathing asset, And I want you to really start thinking about it as it can be your greatest marketing asset. It doesn't just have to be your, business card, which, I think a lot of small businesses, when they get started, they just, they throw up a website and because everybody's got to have a website, but then they kind of leave it at that. But it can be and should be something you're constantly working at. And, that's kind of how SEO works in general. You make small incremental changes and Google will give you those ranking benefits, usually, 3 months to 6 months down the road. And like I alluded to, if you get nothing else right with your SEO, but you have a website that has great content that speaks to the customer, that gives them all the information that they need to know, you're going to win at this game. You can have everything else wrong, but if you have great content, you can win at this game. And there's tons of examples on the internet that back this up. Just, anytime you're searching something, just sometimes look at, the websites out there and you kind of scratch your head sometimes why they're ranking, number one, but then you really dig into it. A lot of times it's because it's more around the content than it is about the aesthetics or, how it looks or anything like that. And why content matters is from an SEO standpoint, there really is SEO value here. One, people are going to be less likely to exit your site. If they land on your site and it's got what they're looking for, if it's got the answers to the questions, or if it has the content related to the products or services they're looking for, they're going to spend more time on your site. So they're not going to bounce. That's what that's known as is if they leave your site quickly. They're going to spend more time on your site, which is also a signal to Google. More time on site signals to Google that people are getting and interacting and finding the information they need. Boom, your ranking site to go up. And then last but not least, and actually this is probably the most important thing, is you're going to get better leads, better customers, because your customers have found what they're looking for and they're going to be informed about your product or service. And so today, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is actually going to be more so geared towards the conversion aspect than it is necessarily going to be about the SEO, because the SEO is going to follow if you just follow what I talk about today. The other thing is SEO, the ranking side of SEO is going to take a while. Like I said, it might take 3 to 6 to 12 months before you start seeing these large ranking increases that you're probably wanting. But in the meantime, you'd be surprised if you just crafted your language a little bit better, answered the customer's questions in the best possible fashion. All of a sudden, you're going to start seeing better leads, better phone calls. And we see this with our own clients. Right out of the gate, we usually are going to improve their homepage and their core pages. We might not see any ranking increase for several months, but we'll start seeing better leads come in right out of the gate because we've started making some of these improvements. Just makes sense. And so some real examples here. Here's a real client, 3-month snapshot following the formula I'm going to talk about today. And they saw a 100% increase in just the last 3 months in terms of their website traffic. Then when we talk about actual rankings increase, This is from November to April. So from November of last year to April, they saw an 800+% increase in their rankings. So across the board, rankings across the board. And in terms of what this is actually tracking, it's actually tracking like total position changes. So they've seen a total rise in positions of like 800 different keywords that they've, or I should say 800 positions, meaning they went from, let's say, spot number 80 to spot number, 5. So an 800+% ranking increase. And then when it really comes down to it, it's really about the customer. And so we see more phone calls. In this particular case, 100% increase in first-time phone calls. And then, like I mentioned, people are going to spend more time on your site, which is another benefit and a ranking signal to Google. So some common pushback when I work with clients is that a lot of times they think the content that we are wanting to put on their website is unnecessary. Because a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is we're going to want to talk about prices. We're going to want to answer every question somebody would have. So lots of FAQ. And a lot of times this means these pages are somewhat long. And so probably the biggest pushback I get is, it's so much. It's just my page is so long. And a lot of business owners or businesses want that real clean look, and that's fine. But sometimes there's this balance you have to reach between like modern, clean aesthetics and what actually Google wants. And like I said earlier, Google likes content. And more importantly, your customers would rather have more info than they would have less info, right? So ask yourself, put yourself in that customer's shoes. Or you picture yourself as the customer. When you go to a website, do you like websites that give you more information about the product or service? Or do you like the ones that give you less? That's how you need to think about your information as well. Does the website that you go to that talks about the pricing, the shipping, the return, all that stuff, and makes it crystal clear on what the expectations are they more likely to get your business than the one that doesn't list their prices, that is unclear about how the product works or what the return policy is? It's all, honestly, a lot of this is just common sense, but your priority is to take the next step. And so the first thing is you have to walk before you can run. And so focus on your core website pages first. A lot of times when we start working with a client, we're starting to take a look at their website, and they might already have tons of blog posts. But then we actually look at kind of their core fundamental pages, which would be the home page, their service pages or product pages, FAQs, their about page, their content, what you're seeing right in front of you. Just the core fundamental pages are often extremely lacking, if not non-existent. Sometimes they might not even have any pages for their product or service. They might just have one page that lists all their services in very little detail, or it might list their products. And usually it's, pretty thin content, and they might not have much else, a contact page. But they've got these blogs and they're wondering, well, why are we not, why is our website not, working for us? Well, you've kind of leapfrogged the fundamentals, and so you need to focus on these core pages on your website first. And if you do, sometimes you may not even have to do blogs until years down the road. So we're going to talk about how we expand on your pages in a sec. But I did actually just want to jump right into what I think you're probably here for, and that's how do we create the perfect content? What I'm really going to talk about is how do you create the perfect page? Because we really want to start with just our core pages on our site. And so, again, what does the customer need to know? Start with that question. And so how I've crafted this is basically these 7 bullet points. Benefits, photos, process, price, FAQs, testimonials, calls to action. You might say, oh, that's pretty basic. That all makes sense. Well, you'd be surprised how many websites, don't even have this information on it. So let's go through each one line by line, starting with the benefits. Makes sense, right? What's the benefit of your product, of your service? And primarily, these are going to be geared towards, your homepage and your service and or product pages, but these do apply to the other pages on your site as well. Let's say you've got an FAQ, you've got pricing. You can kind of take all of these into consideration. So starting with benefits. Talk less about you and more about the customer. What is in it for the customer? What are your true differentiators? No fluff. As in, don't you say things like the industry leader or things that just can't be backed up. Really take the time to think about what is your differentiator as a company that sets you apart from your competitors, and try to avoid all that jargon or that just fluff. Photos. Customers want to see images, right? And I would recommend getting professional photography done. They want to see the inside of your building if they're coming to it. They want to see pictures of your staff. They want to see pictures of your team at work or your product at in use. So show the customer what it is that you're selling, and so they can picture what it would work like for them or what they could expect. So, it seems kind of fundamental, but avoid the stock photography if you can, and really go out there and get some professional photos done. And then don't skimp on them. If you can include a gallery or anything that would take the customer a little further along in their journey, they're going to appreciate that. They want to see these things. So those first two were pretty, fundamental. They kind of make sense, right? Here's the next one. And this one, I'm going to stress, from a customer standpoint, we've seen a ton of success with how customers respond when our web pages talk about the process. And the process being, what can the customer expect when working with you or when purchasing your service? So process being everything when it comes to, what can they expect from the service? What can they expect from the product? Even what can they expect when they call you? Those are all things you should include. So we really stress this with our clients on all their individual services. We definitely want to show, what the customer could expect. So here's a landscaping company. And what we did is basically broke it down into the 4 days. There's usually common questions that somebody has about a service or a product. And so we asked this client, how long does it actually take? Does your process take? And he said, the average landscaping job usually takes about 4 days. I said, can you break that down for us? And so this is what it came down to. Day one, they clean up, they remove all the old trees. Then they lay the foundation, which is all the dirt work. They do the curbing day 3, and then they install the fabric, rocks, everything day 4. Now that's your standard, landscaping project. Now, is that every landscaping project? No, not at all. There's going to be some that probably take 2 days, some that take 10 days. But if you can kind of just think about what's your most common, deliverable, what's your most common service, just speak to that. And of course you can have a disclaimer or whatever about different scenarios, or you could have every scenario. Again, the more information, the better. Here's a dentist that we work with, and basically we just laid out the process. What can a new patient expect from working with this dentist? So here's what you can expect. You schedule your first visit, you come in, you meet with our team, you fill out your paperwork, you do a tour, boom, 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 boom. And this is all part of a greater patient information page that is quite in depth and really takes that patient through everything they need to know. Insurance, starting their paperwork, the patient portal, all that stuff. So next is price. So the two things I probably get the most pushback on are the process and the price, and more so the price. I don't know why, but businesses really want to shy away from listing their prices. But here's a scenario, and here's why it's so important, is because your customers actually search this stuff a lot. They are curious about how much stuff costs. And coming strictly from a Google point of view, if my job here is just to tell you what's going to get you ranking better and get you more traffic, you should probably have some information about the cost. Because in this scenario with our dentist here, she provides Invisalign. And what's the number one thing that gets searched with regard to Invisalign? And that's the cost. So we shouldn't shy away from it. Now, you don't have to have exact pricing. That's usually the biggest pushback is, well, we can't have exact prices, or every situation might be different. Maybe a certain business quotes prices. And then the other thing I hear a lot of is, well, then my competitors are going to know how much I charge, and they're going to undercut me. And I'll just speak to that right away. That might be the case. And coming from a marketing standpoint, you don't want to be the business that's always worried about being undercut. But the businesses, when we can actually get our clients to list something with regard to price, their leads always get better. And they always come back to us and are like, wow, you were right. Man, once we start listing our prices, all of a sudden the calls we're getting are like people ready to buy. And they've actually been on our site. They've read how much things cost, and they literally just are like, hey, yeah, I want package number 3, or I saw it's going to cost this much. Every time we do this, our clients come back to us and thank us for kind of pushing back on them about this, because the type of customers they start to get are informed, and they're not tire kickers either. The other thing about when you don't list anything with regard to the expectation of cost is you get a lot of just people like, hey, how much does this cost? And do you do this, free consultations? And you end up, wasting a lot of time with just these kind of like tire kickers or poor leads. So it weeds out a lot of that. So it doesn't have to be exact pricing. Do a pricing range. Give the customer an expectation of what could be expected. Okay, so for those of you that know me, I work with a lot of service-based local businesses. So we've already talked about law firms, dentists. Okay, if I go to a law firm, I have absolutely no idea what to expect, right? I've never hired a lawyer, so unless I have ever hired a lawyer, I would have no idea what a lawyer costs. So give me some expectation as to what that's going to be. On average, on the low end, it's going to be X, and on the high end, it's going to be this, or maybe it's based on the amount of time put into it. Anything is better than nothing. If you've got pricing options, financing, list that. And then a lot of medical facilities have insurance, and insurance, and that's a big one. So any of our physicians that we work with, the number one thing that gets asked or searched is, do you take this insurance? Do you take this insurance? Do you take that insurance? And when we list this stuff, we find that they're not having to field so many calls of asking that, especially if they don't take the insurance. And just to put the proof in the pudding, it's not just so much about, hearing me say this works, or it's going to increase the type of leads you get. You will actually improve your Google rankings too, and you can achieve what's seen here, which is a featured snippet. So this same client had mentioned how much Invisalign costs, and we don't even in the page, we don't even talk about the specific price. We say it starts at $5,500. And they've achieved a snippet here. So when you Google this, they're the first thing that pops up. I'll show it to you right now. I did it right. Boom. This is an actual Google search, cost of Invisalign in Beaverton. Because they've answered this question and they've done it well, they've achieved the snippet. And you can go to the page here. It's just right down here. And it's not like it's not even that, you know, we could have answered this way more in depth. It just literally in bold, the cost of Invisalign starts at $550. And if we were to expand on this, I guarantee we probably could even take this further and achieve even more, you know, snippets and whatnot. But that's a start. Next, FAQs. You know, most businesses are used to answering these, and a lot of times they will already have these on their site. I would encourage you to just expand and just, again, try to answer every single potential question a customer would have. That's going to make the customer more informed, and they do read these things. What I didn't mention when I get pushback from clients is a lot of times their pushback is, well, you know, people aren't going to read all this stuff. You know, why are we going to make a page so rich with content? Nobody's really going to read that. And then all of a sudden the phone calls they start getting, they're like, wow, they really read that. They really read through that. And I kid you not, it's amazing. Customers do read this stuff. But even if they don't, sometimes they don't. They're going to probably graze through your content and find what they're looking for. But at the end of the day, this content is important from a Google standpoint. So you should do it regardless because that's the end game. And so here's an example. This is my website. I've got some FAQs. And when you add these FAQs, much like the featured snippet I just showed you, you can achieve these FAQ snippets as well in Google. This is right smack dab in the Google results. And when you answer questions that people look for and they search commonly, Google picks up on that and will start pulling that information and oftentimes featuring you. Last, well, not lastly, but second to last, testimonials. So testimonials just are more of a conversion technique than they are an SEO play. But reviews are really that thing that, you know, help that customer make their decision. And so you can do this simply by having testimonials or reviews listed on your website. This acts also as social proof, but also, you know, in addition to testimonials and reviews, you can have awards, credentials, all that stuff. Add that stuff to your pages, and all of a sudden you're going to look more credible. The customers are going to see the amount of reviews you have. They're going to read some of them, and you're just providing more value to them. So that's high level. Some things I like to do. I like to find testimonials that relate to each service or product and actually put that 1 or 2 or 3 testimonials regarding that specific service or product on each page. And then if you had specific team members, let's say, you know, you're a law firm, maybe you have several lawyers, or your dental practice, you've got several dentists, or what else? Or even just your products. But let's say, I'm just trying to think of another example. Let's say you're like a water restoration company, and you know, you feature each one of your handymen that go into homes. Well, if there's specific reviews for those team members, put them on there. That's just kind of a little thing that I like to do. Just builds credibility. And then finally, your calls to action. So this is a big one. You know, at the end of the day, you have to instruct the customer what their next step is, right? I see a lot of pages and a lot of websites that have a lot of great information, but they never tell the customer what to do. Are they supposed to call? Are they supposed to fill out a form? What's the next step? So this is where you can get really crystal clear. And this kind of goes into the process. I actually had this lumped in a little bit with process, and I pulled it out because we do both. We usually talk about the process, but then we also talk about the process of contacting us. So here's an example. Again, a law firm. Okay, if you're going to contact us, here's what it's going to look like. Schedule your consult, become a client, make a plan, get back to life. It's like it's kind of those things. People like to see things in 3s or 4s. So give them a cadence. That's what we're trying to achieve here. But it's also about the process. You essentially, with your website, you get to guide the customer on how you want them to contact you and what the expectation is going to be, which is awesome. Here's a water restoration company. I like to get really crystal clear on this stuff. So, they claimed that they would answer, every call 24/7, and that's great. But they also made this claim that they would arrive in 4 hours, which I thought was pretty powerful. So middle of the night, no matter where you're at, within like a 90-mile radius, they're gonna be there in 4 hours. But then I asked, well, what happens if you actually missed a call? You say you're available 24/7. What if you missed the call? And they said, well, we'll make sure we call them back in 30 minutes or less. So I want the customer to know, because what I don't want is if they call and somebody doesn't answer, they're frustrated now, and maybe they don't get a call back, or they don't know when to they're going to get a call back, and they go straight to Google and they're going to leave a nasty review. Because if I promise 24/7 answering and we didn't deliver, that's bad customer service. But also in this situation, if my house has just been flooded and I get an answering machine, I want to know that, am I even going to get a call back, or do I need to move on to the next company? So here we talked about, if you reach an answering machine, we will call you within 30 minutes. And, we just want to reiterate that we're going to be at your site within 4 hours. And lastly, what you can do, and really where this starts to become kind of powerful, is you can direct your clients or your customers on like how you want them to contact you and when you don't want them to contact you. So this is a chiropractor, and we just wanted to make like crystal clear on like how we want to be reached. And so first off, we want them to fill out the form first and foremost. We'd rather they fill out the form, and then we're going to call them back during business hours. So we just put that in our language. The best way to get a hold of us is to request an appointment. To do so, complete this form, and we'll call you back as soon as possible during business hours. Right? So that's kind of like we're setting the stage. That's what you can expect, and we will call you back. But we also have, hey, want to get started today? If it's an emergency, you can call us, but we might not necessarily answer right away, and we'll try our best to fit you in. And when we put this language on the site, it's like the leads they started getting such better leads, and not necessarily better, but the leads were coming in the manner that they wanted them to come in. It wasn't just this hodgepodge of, where you're just trying, you're fielding calls and you're just taking anything, anyway, however the customer wants, Use your website as a tool to guide the process, and it works. So some things to consider with crafting this perfect page is it should have 750 words or more. And if you follow the steps I just outlined, there should be no reason why you can't hit 750 words easily. Second, link to other pages on your site. So as you start to craft and build out these core pages, make sure you're linking to other relevant pages on your site. So if you're mentioning the contact page, link to the contact page. If you're on one of your product pages mentioning another product, link to it and all that stuff. If you're talking about your staff, link to that page. Google loves that. And that's part of the SEO power. Then a few other things, if you want to expand on this, videos, infographics, before and afters, these are all things people want to see. So the more you can do, the better. But I will urge you in this way. Have a minimum viable product. If you can't do all of this right out of the gate, just get started. And like I said, your website is something that can be improved upon at all times. So you can maybe get one of your pages up kind of following this model. And then down the road, you add a video or an infographic, or you start adding some more photos once you get them. Let's say you have professional photography done. This is a work in progress. And so it doesn't have to be perfect. Next, I just want to actually walk you through some wireframe templates. You can get these at in my Facebook group. Just go to the Facebook group under guides. These wireframe templates are in here, or you can just message me directly and I will get them to you. So just over the years, I've just kind of, we've done so many websites that we, kind of just developed a formula. And a lot of this is pulled from other, marketing materials. We did a lot of Story Brand. If you're not familiar with that, I highly recommend it. It's called Building a Story Brand by Don Miller. Great, excellent book. He's written a few books, but he talks all about the messaging, not just on your website. It's actually more so for your brand in general, but we really tried to incorporate some of that philosophy. Now, we don't follow that verbatim because from an SEO standpoint, I feel, anyways, the materials out there for StoryBrand, I don't feel are always the most best for SEO. So what we did is just, over the years kind of crafted what we thought were kind of our ideal page templates, and I've provided them to you. And these are a work in progress. If I probably will make updates as, things change. And as I think of things, but if you work with us or if you see any of our kind of clientele, we sort of follow this model, which is this is the homepage. So we've kind of got our headline and calls to action, and all in the template, I tell you exactly how to label these as from an SEO standpoint. So what to use as your heading, where to include your main target keyword and whatnot. Then we go right into a listing of the services or the product. Now, some businesses have lots of these. Some only have, 2 or 3. But we want to go right into listing those and linking to them, more importantly. If you have, let's say, 10 products, and you don't necessarily want to list them on the whole page, all on the homepage, you could just start with your top, 3, or whatever are your, money makers. Then we just get into, some kind of benefit. This is kind of from StoryBrand, speaking to the customer, calls to action, our process, testimonials, pricing, social proof down here, and calls to action. Now, this is just a guide. If you're the type of person that just wants to follow something verbatim, then go ahead. By all means, you can follow this all day. But we don't always follow this verbatim, even with our own clients. This is kind of our roadmap. And then each client, we sort of personalize as it makes sense for the business and whatnot. So that's our homepage. Kind of what I've talked about more today is really about the products and services. And so that's this one, pretty much kind of following it, exactly what I laid out earlier. So we go, headlines, some details. These would be our benefits, process. Actually, here's benefit. Pricing, frequently asked questions. And the only thing I don't have in this template that I need to add is testimonials, some sort of testimonial. And so this is kind of the baseline, but you as a business or as a marketer for a business, have fun with this. You can expand as much on this as you want. It doesn't have to just stay confined to what you're seeing right here. So lastly, make a plan. So how do you actually implement this in a practical manner? Hopefully everything I've talked about is somewhat sensible, But really now it's taking that and turning it into action. So first off, we talked about your core pages. So again, here's essentially your core pages. Make sure you just start with your homepage, move on to your services, then work on things like, does there need to be a pricing page? Should I have an FAQ page? Should I have a specific page for just reviews? If you don't have these things and it's of value to your customer, then create it. About page, you can expand on that. Your contact page, again, you can expand on that. It doesn't, your contact page really is kind of like that last step before they contact you. So it shouldn't just be like a blank contact form. Tell the customer, like I showed you, what steps they should do and what the expectation will be. And then if you serve a local community, you can have location pages if you've got multiple locations or you serve a certain community. So this is a legitimate business that we are working with. So this is a law firm. And when I say, a lot of times businesses will just leapfrog to blogging, it's true. And we often, you're going to see here, blogging is like the last thing we do. It really is. We make sure that we've got the core pages taken care of, and then we go ahead and we make sure that, do we need to create additional pages for other products or services? So this law firm has 4 core areas: criminal defense, estate planning, family law, trial, and business disputes. Those are kind of their 4 areas of practice. So they already had some existing pages. What you're going to see in yellow are existing. And they had some sub pages created. So under family law, they had a divorce page. They had this family matters, domestic contracts, and they had a child custody. But they do all these other areas of law, and they had nothing on their site about it. So literally our first year, our 12-month plan for this client is just to go through and build out everything in red. So we're going to build out a page for sealing criminal records, DUI drug offenses, boom, boom, boom. And yeah, we're just going to follow the formula I showed you, and we're going to tackle this, about 2 pages a month. Then once we've done that, in blue, we're going to consider creating, and most likely that'll be our next step, is we're going to create pages for some of their lesser areas of law that maybe aren't as big of a moneymaker or, aren't as important to the business. But certainly we would want to create a page most likely before we jump, to blogging. And so that's a real example for a law firm. Here's another, that same dentist I was talking about earlier, kind of the same scenario. We've been working with her for several years now. And honestly, we've written 1 blog post because she asked us to. Otherwise, all we have done is work on improving her core service pages and actually building them out. So here's, dentistry and law all have kind of a lot of areas, and things that they do. So we built out, a page just for cleanings, page for bridges. I showed you the Invisalign one already. And then, patient info, insurance, all these had to be developed before we go and implement some sort of blog content strategy, right? It just wouldn't make sense to jump into blogging when we haven't even explained to the customer, how they're going to pay or what the insurances are, the things they actually want to know. And so how you can break this down is phase 1, tackle it in 6 to 12 months, improve those core pages, like I mentioned. Phase 2, create a page for each service or product if you haven't. So if there's, products or services that you haven't created pages for and it warrants, go ahead and start there. So again, here's our lawyer. We've got our 4 practice areas, and we're going to create pages underneath those practice areas like so. And mind you, like I said, phase 1 and 2 might take you 2 years. depending on how aggressively you go at this. Because, like we've seen we're looking at, what do we got here? 20, 30 pages here. Well, think about a 20, 30 page site. That's going to be a pretty robust site by the time you're done with it. And bite these off in chunks that you can, chew. This stuff isn't going to happen overnight, but if you do this consistently and you build one page, start with your most important pages first, by the way, and services, then you move on. You're going to see over time, your SEO gets better. All of a sudden that product page you built 3 months ago is starting to rank, and it's starting to get picked up, and people are going to see it and they're calling now, and you get momentum. It's a snowball effect. That's when, once you've got your services, products, and all that buttoned up, that's when you can start thinking about phase 3, which is creating content that supports your services or products. So this is where it'd be things like blogs, guides, infographics, videos, all the fun stuff. And I do mean it. This is where things start to get fun, but all that needs to come later. If you truly want to, win at this game of SEO and have a website that converts. So phase 3, and phase 3 can look a lot of different ways, but I'm just going to specifically talk about blogs because that's where most people's heads go, is blogs. So picture the scenario I showed you in phase 2, where let's say we've built out our service, all our service or product pages. Now we've got a blog that we want to create. So here's how I would structure it, and here's what we're going to talk about next week. You want to create content that supports your products and services. Think function. Your website needs function. I mean, hopefully that's basically what I've gotten across today. What's the function of your website? Is it your greatest marketing asset? Is it telling the customers what you do and how you do it and what they can expect? So when you think about content, how do you add to that? So in this scenario, we've got our custody. We just picked a service and we picked custody. Well, now we can start creating content around custody. So what are all the things regarding custody that matter? Oh, there's tons. We could probably have 2 years worth of content just on custody. Let's see. What are the laws in North Dakota and Minnesota about custody? Let's see. More often, how do husbands versus wives fare, when it comes to custody? What do 50-50 splits look like? Custody when you are a step parent. Man, you could go on and on. But the key is it's got purpose. It's supporting a page or a service that you provide or a product. And then the real key is with these arrows. Is that you're linking to and from. So your custody page is actually going to link out to these blogs you create, and those blogs are going to link back. And you start powering up your website. So it looks kind of like this. So this is why you kind of got to bite these off in chunks, So those blogs I just showed you would be over here. We've got our custody page down here. And let's say we're going to create, 4 blogs for that. They're going to all kind of be pointing to this custody page. And we'll just kind of go down the list. And that's where, you've got, this starts to be like, whoa, this is intense. So you can, take it in a lot of different stages. Maybe you write 1 quarter, you write 3 or 4 blog posts just for divorce. Next quarter, you move on to custody, and here now if we just focus on our blogs, we've got, a couple years worth probably, which seems crazy, but like I said, this is where the fun begins. And also, this is where your website starts becoming your greatest marketing asset, and your website is going to kick all of your competitors' butts. If you really look at this for the long haul, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and it's something you're constantly building upon, you're going to have a website that can't be competed with, hands down. So that's all I have. Let's see, Q&A. I'll take some Q&A now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to show you. No, I think that was really it.
I don't think I have any questions. I'm interested to see how to hear about the blogs next week.
Yeah. Yep.
Just thinking about how like the ranch does our blog, like it's more story based.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to just see how you talk about the blog versus what we're currently doing. So yeah,
I can even touch on that now, and that was something I thought about mentioning. That's a great question, because there is sort of always this balance of, do we want to put information about the company that's more just focused on our people and whatnot, and maybe things that we're doing, versus a more intense blog that's like kind of maybe what I showed you, which is about custody and whatnot. I think once you've gotten to like phase 3, and in your case, I would say you guys are there. We've kind of, we've taken care of your core pages. Your core site is really strong now. So now you can start thinking about, okay, yeah, now what's the next step with our content? So, I think it's okay to definitely do that, like, people focused, story focused type material. It might not rank as easily or as quickly, or it might not get as much traffic. But I think there's purpose there, and it can still serve a purpose from just a marketing or branding standpoint, but also it's still good for SEO also. There's SEO value in creating that post. And
I know we share a lot of our blogs on social media too. Yeah. So is that going to be part of what you talk about next week?
Yeah, it is. Yep. Okay. Yep. That's kind of the next element, is creating. And that's really how you can maybe think about it. If you really want to think about, like, does this warrant a blog article? Think about, like, what's its shareability? Is this going to be something people want to read and share? So there's probably going to be kind of two boats. There's going to be things that get shared because it's about like somebody local, or it's about people they know, and maybe they're familiar with the brand and like, oh, I know her or whatever, and they're going to share it. So you can get shares that way. And then there's kind of the like more like academic shares, where if you've got a really bomb blog post about a subject matter, it starts ranking nationally, and now all of a sudden you're getting shares from people you don't even know in parts of the country you don't even know, which might not benefit you locally. And you might even think, well, how does that even benefit the business? It benefits the website. So that when that starts to happen, regardless, your website starts to build authority, and your SEO only gets better, which in turn will improve, things locally as well.
Yep. So, yep.
Perfect example. I've got a chiropractor that I work with, and we had started a blog strategy, and, much like exactly kind of what I'm laying out, for you, and I will next week. Well, one of her blogs, somebody's logging in. One of her blogs is about pregnancy, or going to the chiropractor while you're pregnant. Well, that gets like, it's in like the number 4 spot if you Google pregnancy and chiropractic. So she gets a ton of traffic from it, which doesn't help her locally per se. They're not her customers, but she actually, that sharing of that post, and actually it's actually gotten some links, that helps your website. So, it kind of just goes back to, is your website the most helpful website in your industry for your customer? And, you might not see the results right away, but, if you're thinking long term and you're really thinking about this Google engine and pleasing what Google wants, then these things all do make sense in the long run. So.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Well, yeah. Thanks for coming on. Jennifer, if you don't have any questions, I will log off here and just, feel free to, obviously, Aaron, you got my info, and, feel free to hit me up in Facebook. Thanks for watching. If you want to be a part of these live trainings and get answers to your SEO related questions, all you have to do is join my private Facebook group. Go to mysiteranked.com/Facebook and join for free.